Dira never imagined that her life would shatter in the beautiful country of France. From the outside, everything seemed perfect: a cozy little house in Annecy, a successful husband, and a sweet little daughter. But behind the large windows and subtle smiles, there was an emptiness that grew harder and harder to conceal with each passing day. When a message on her husband's phone uncovered a wound she was never prepared for, Dira was forced to face the bitter reality of love, loneliness, and betrayal that had quietly blossomed behind the veil of domestic routine. This is the story of a loss that doesn't always come from death, but from someone who still comes home, only not for you anymore. From the outside, our house appeared serene. The walls were painted in ivory white, the large windows always sparkling clean, and the small balcony on the second floor overlooked the majestic Alps. In autumn like this, the leaves in the front yard turned to shades of deep orange and crimson red. Little birds would occasionally land on the wooden fence, and the sound of the wind from Lake Annecy, not far from here, often whispered like a secret. To an outsider, the house would surely seem like the perfect dream home. But to someone living within it, this house was nothing more than a building that echoed with the remnants of something long dead. My name is Dira. It used to be Dira Setiawan, but after marrying Reza, I adopted his name for the sake of administrative purposes here. We moved to Annecy 5 years ago, after Reza secured a permanent job as an architect at a French-Japanese construction firm. Annecy was chosen because of its quiet nature, far from the hustle and bustle of major cities like Paris or Lyon, and because, supposedly, it was ideal for raising children. At first, I agreed. And perhaps in the beginning, everything did go well. We still kissed each other on the forehead before bed. There were still little conversations around the dining table. There was still laughter. But then, life happened. I quit my job as an interior designer after Ayla was born. They said it would make our lives more stable. I agreed back then. I thought being a housewife wouldn't be this hard. But little by little, I began to lose myself. Day by day, I seemed to vanish. No one was looking. No one was really seeing. That morning felt like any other. I woke up at 6, prepared lunch for Reza and breakfast for Ayla. I had already arranged everything in the fridge the night before. I took out the white plates with blue patterns from the cupboard. I turned on the toaster, poured orange juice into a small glass for Ayla, and brewed Reza's favorite black coffee. Everything felt like a script I had memorized by heart. Ayla woke up with messy hair and half-closed eyes. She sat at the dining table and began drawing on a napkin. A mountain, a lake, and the sun. Just like yesterday. I want to go to the park after school, she said. Only if the rain stops, I replied softly, spreading jam on the toast. Reza came down later. He wore a gray shirt, an unfastened tie, and eyes still heavy with sleep. He touched my shoulder briefly and said, "Thanks, darling." Then he sat down and opened his tablet. No hug. No morning kiss. Just a small formality that felt bland. We ate in silence. Only the sound of spoons and Ayla's quiet humming filled the air. I glanced at Reza. He seemed absorbed in the news. Occasionally, he smiled to himself. But it wasn't a smile for me. It had been a long time since it was. After Reza and Ayla left, I began cleaning the table. I gathered the crumbs, washed the cups, swept the floor. I glanced at the clock. It was only 8. The day was still long. I wanted to write. I wanted to paint. I wanted to do something that would make me feel alive. But for some reason, every time I sat at my desk, I just stared at the blank paper. It felt like my mind had shut down. I eventually sat on the living room sofa, playing an old Indonesian song, one that we used to listen to when we were still dating. That song brought back so many memories. The times we rode around Bandung on a motorbike. The time Reza chased me at the airport when I almost cancelled my trip. The time he secretly proposed at a small cafe, with a plastic ring because the real one was left in the car. Those memories still lingered. But the man with me now wasn't the same Reza. Around 10 in the morning, I began tidying up the dining table. And that's when I saw Reza's phone. He had left it behind. He usually always took it with him, or if he forgot, he would quickly call from the office. I didn't mean to pry. But the phone lit up. A notification appeared on the screen. Ayla Moreau. A name I didn't recognize. I didn't know who she was. But the way her name appeared, coupled with the message visible on the screen, made the world seem to stop turning. You kept me up all night, Za. When can we meet again? My hand shook. My heart pounded in my chest. My breath became shallow. I placed the phone back on the table like it was something hot, burning my skin. I didn't cry immediately. Nor did I feel angry. All I felt was emptiness. It was as though my entire body had frozen. I sat on the floor. For a long time. Staring at the perfect wooden floor, just like our marriage appeared from the outside. The message was brief. But enough to destroy 8 years of trust. Enough to make me question everything. Was it all just pretend? When did he meet her? Did Ayla know Reza was married? Did she also know about Elena? I knew I had to wait for Reza to come home to ask. But how could I stay calm after this? How could I pretend today was just any other day? By 11, I finally stood up. I made myself some chamomile tea to calm down. But my hands still shook as I held the cup. Tears began to fall one by one. Not because I was angry. But because I was disappointed. Because I knew, this wound wasn't one that could be healed with just an apology. That afternoon, I didn't cook lunch. I didn't sweep again. I didn't open the windows like I usually did. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photo frame of our small family. In that photo, we were standing in front of Lake Annecy. Reza was hugging me from behind. Elena was in the middle, holding both of our hands. We all looked so happy. But it turns out, photos can lie. That evening, Reza came home just like he always did. Exactly at 6:30. He opened the door with the duplicate key we kept in the garage, took off his shoes at the doorway, and hung his jacket on the back of the kitchen door. His every movement was the same as it had been yesterday, the day before, and the weeks prior. The only difference was me. I already knew. I had read his message. I knew the woman's name. I recognized the flirtatious, confident tone in her words. I knew that my husband, who once swore he would love only me, had now shared himself with someone else. But that night, I chose silence. Reza came into the dining room and kissed Elena on the forehead. "What did you learn at school today?" he asked while pouring himself a glass of water. "English," Elena replied, and I drew a butterfly. "Nice. I like butterflies." He turned to me and smiled faintly. "Thank you, the food's great as always." I just nodded. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Inside, a hard anger was building in my chest. But I held it in. I wanted to see how far he would go in lying to me. "I have to work late the day after tomorrow," he said, chewing his food. "Deadline for the hotel project in Lyon. The Japanese client is coming." "Late again?" I asked softly. "Again?" Reza swallowed quickly. "Yeah. This week's going to be busier." Elena giggled as she drew on her plastic plate. I looked at my husband. He spoke without hesitation. He lied so smoothly. And that was the most painful part. After dinner, he went upstairs first. I heard the sound of the shower from the bathroom. Elena was still in the living room, watching a cartoon while playing with her dolls. I sat on the sofa, staring at the dimmed chandelier. My mind was a mess. Then I took my phone and opened the note app. I began to write. The first day after I found out. He came home like usual. Ate like usual. Lied like usual. And me? I'm starting to not be like usual. I saved the note and let the night pass. I didn't sleep in the same room as Reza. For the past 2 months, I'd been sleeping in Elena's room, telling myself it was because she had nightmares. In truth, it was me who couldn't sleep. The next morning, Reza left earlier than usual. He said he had a meeting at 8. He kissed my cheek quickly, like a routine we both had grown tired of. I didn't look at him. After he left, I sat in my room and opened my long-neglected social media account. I started searching for Ayla Moreau. It didn't take long. In the digital world, everyone leaves a trace. Her private account was locked. But there was one public post from 2 months ago. A photo of a coffee cup at a Japanese restaurant, with a caption in French. Petit déjeuner avec toi est le meilleur début de semaine. Breakfast with you is the best start to the week. I recognized that cup. Reza had posted the same photo on his story, just from a different angle. My hand shook. I took a screenshot of it and returned to the dining room. In front of me, the table looked perfectly tidy. Too tidy. That afternoon, I picked up Ayla earlier than usual. Her teacher, Madame Leroy, greeted me with a friendly smile. Ayla always talks about her father, she said. They're very close, aren't they? I only smiled. There was truth in that. Reza was indeed close to Ayla. He was a considerate father. He never raised his voice. Never shouted. Never got angry. But being a good father doesn't always mean being a faithful husband. That night, I waited for Reza to come home without saying a word. He brought a long baguette and 2 éclairs from our favorite shop. Perhaps an unspoken apology without any recognition. Aren't you hungry? He asked as I sat silently at the table. I just shook my head. I ate earlier. Reza seemed awkward. He sat down, opened his laptop, and pretended to read. He must have felt something was different. But he didn't ask. And I didn't tell him. In my heart I thought, fine. If you want to pretend, let's pretend together. On the third night, I heard Reza talking on the phone from the balcony. His voice was soft, but it was loud enough to hear through the kitchen window that was slightly open. I miss you too. But I can't tomorrow. She's starting to suspect. Then a pause. Yeah, me too. Let me arrange the timing. I wanted to open the door and slap him. But I just sat there, gripping the arm of the chair until my fingers turned white. I went back to my room and wrote again in my phone's notes. The third day after I found out. He called secretly. He said, I miss you too. Funny, I've already forgotten what it feels like to be missed. A few days later, I decided to start collecting evidence. I hid a small voice recorder in the pocket of Reza's coat. I knew this could be considered an invasion of privacy. But I didn't care. If I was going to make a big decision later, I wanted to have reasons that weren't just based on my feelings. And sure enough, the first recording made my chest tighten. Ayla's voice was clear. I like it when you wear that blue shirt. You look mature but still young. Then Reza's voice replied. You make me feel young again. At home I feel like, just a machine. They laughed. Then there was a brief silence. Then Ayla spoke softly. When can you be free from her? Free from her. Her was me. His legal wife. The mother of his child. The woman he had brought to this country. Me. The one who had been cleaning the floors of the house they used as their place to return to. That night, I threw up in the bathroom. My body trembled. Not because of illness, but because of disgust. Not just at Reza, but at myself for having believed for so long. The next morning, when Reza left for work and Ayla was still asleep, I sat at the dining table. I stared at the empty chair where Reza usually sat for breakfast. The chair seemed ordinary. But for me now, it held the traces of 2 worlds. The world I had once believed in, and the world that now hurt me every morning. I opened the small drawer near the bookshelf. I took out our photo album. I flipped through pages that I hadn't been able to face. A photo of Reza at Lake Annecy, holding little Ayla. A photo of us kissing under the Christmas lights. A photo in front of our first home when the snow fell for the first time. Each picture was a promise. And now, each promise had turned into a lie. I closed the album and placed it in the bottom drawer. Then I locked it. That night, Reza came home later than usual. He said there was an impromptu meeting. I didn't ask. I didn't even look at him. He kissed my cheek quickly as usual, then went into the bedroom. I remained in the living room. Dim light. Silence. Then I wrote one final line in my phone's notes. The 6th day after I found out. He thinks I don't know. But what I know most now is who no longer loves me. Some things cannot be postponed for too long. As much as I wanted to, as much as I was afraid, as much as I tried to hold it back in every way I could. I knew that if I delayed any further, my heart could die completely. And perhaps if I let it all continue without a word, I would vanish into myself. That day was a Saturday. A cool morning with a grey sky. Dew clung to the kitchen window, and the sound of birds from the neighboring tree could be faintly heard. Reza was at home because his project was on a weekend break. He wore a grey sweater and casual trousers. He looked like an ordinary man enjoying his weekend with his family. But I knew, what was hidden behind his calm face was no longer something I could suppress with pretending. I waited until nightfall. Waiting for Ayla to fall asleep after asking me to read her a storybook about fairies and a snow forest. She drifted off to sleep holding her bunny doll. Her breath light. Peaceful. I went downstairs, to our balcony that overlooked the lake. The lights from the small town of Annecy glowed faintly in the distance, reflected on the calm water's surface. A cold wind from the mountains gently brushed past, carrying the damp scent typical of autumn nights. Reza was sitting there, sipping coffee from his favorite big white mug. I stood at the glass door, silent, just watching him. He turned slowly and smiled faintly. The air tonight is really nice, isn't it? I walked slowly to the seat next to him, sat down, folding my arms across my chest. Then I spoke. You're cheating, aren't you? The words fell like a stone into a still pond. It didn't explode. It didn't echo. But it sank. Reza froze. His face suddenly drained of color. His hand, holding the cup, trembled slightly. He turned to me. Our eyes met in a long silence. "Dir," he said softly. "How long?" I asked. He took a deep breath, then looked up at the sky. "I don't know where to begin." I stared at him. Straight. Without blinking. "Ayla," I said. "The woman you had breakfast with, the one you called at midnight, the one who said you kept her up all night. That's her, isn't it?" Reza nodded. Slowly. Then he buried his face in his hands. "I didn't plan this, Dir. I don't even understand why I." "How long?" I cut him off. 4 months. I took a deep breath. My chest tightened. But I didn't cry. Not tonight. "So for the last 4 months, you came home to this house, kissed our child, sat at the dining table I prepared, and pretended everything was fine?" He lowered his head. "I know I'm wrong. That's not what I asked." He went quiet. Then he said, "I'm confused. I feel lost." Lost. I laughed bitterly. "So you call your betrayal getting lost?" "I feel lonely, Dir. In this house, we've become like 2 strangers." His words made me tense up. I turned my body toward him. "So, you feel lonely. But you never said anything. You never talked to me. You just chose silence, then slept with another woman." Reza sighed, deeply. He lifted his head and looked at me. "I didn't just sleep with her." My eyes sharpened. "What do you mean?" "I fell in love." 1 sentence. But enough to make my heart stop. I didn't answer. I just stood up. My legs felt like they were no longer on solid ground. But I had to leave that place. I had to get away from him. I walked into the house. But Reza called out to me. "Dir, wait. I'm not finished talking." I turned around. My gaze cut through him. "You're done. I just haven't started." He stood up, following me into the living room. "I never intended to leave you. But I've gone too far. I'm confused too. I still love you. And Ayla." "Don't bring Ayla into this," I said firmly. "Your love for our child won't clean up the mess you've made with her mother." Reza sat on the chair, his head down. He looked like a coward who had finally run out of excuses. I sat far away from him, my back straight, my hands gripping the sides of the sofa. "Why didn't you say something from the beginning? When you started feeling like we were strangers? Why did you choose to run to another woman?" "I was afraid," he said. "Afraid we'd really fall apart." I laughed, bitterly. "You were afraid we'd fall apart, so you decided to destroy it first." Silence. The ticking of the clock on the wall was incredibly loud. I stared at him for a long time. Then I said, "I won't make a decision right away. But from tonight, we sleep separately." Reza nodded slowly. "Der. I'm sorry." I stood up. Looked at him one last time. "Your apology isn't for me. It's for yourself." I walked to the bedroom. Slowly closed the door. leaned my body against it and stared at the ceiling. Then for the first time that night, I cried. Not because of losing love, but because of losing my self-worth. That afternoon in Annecy was like any other. Cold, the gentle breeze from the lake brushing my face, and the sky a silvery hue. I walked slowly along the sidewalk of Ville, holding Elena's hand, her little steps hopping with excitement as we headed to the toy store. We'll just buy a small one, sweetie. Mama only brought enough money, I said, holding back a smile. Elena nodded quickly. I want a singing teddy bear. We turned onto Rue St. Clair, a narrow street lined with local shops. The smell of warm bread and cheese from the boulangerie greeted us from the right. That street brought back many memories. Reza and I used to stroll here, joking, sharing croissants, stealing glances at each other. But that afternoon, those memories were silenced by something stronger than nostalgia, pain. Because just in front of the toy store, a few steps from where Elena and I stood, I saw him. Reza. He wasn't alone. Beside him stood a young woman. Her shoulder-length hair was golden blonde, with bangs framing her French face. She wore a long black coat, a cream scarf, and brown leather boots. She was beautiful. Too beautiful to be a secret. They were laughing. Reza had his hand raised as if telling her something. She laughed lightly while touching his arm. And my husband, who at home was always quiet and stiff, was now smiling widely, his eyes alive, his body open, like a young man in love. I suddenly stopped walking. My heart was racing. But my face remained frozen. My hand gripped Elena's tighter without me realizing it. Mama, it hurts, Elena murmured softly. I quickly loosened my grip. Sorry, sweetheart, I said. Let's go over there. I remember a shortcut. I pulled Elena away, down a narrow alley leading to the back of the toy store. Walking quickly, I glanced over my shoulder once more. They were still there. Still laughing. Still standing too close for two people who were supposedly undecided about anything. My steps were shaking. I didn't know how I could stay standing. But I knew one thing, seeing it with my own eyes hurt far more than anything I had ever imagined. We entered the store from the side door. Elena immediately ran to the row of dolls and interactive toys. I stood by the children's bookshelf, pretending to browse. But my mind wasn't there. My thoughts were trapped on Reza's face. On the way he smiled at that woman. A smile that used to be mine. 15 minutes later, they left. I peeked through the small curtain in the store. Reza and Ayla walked toward the parking lot. He opened the car door and let Ayla in first. He glanced around for a moment. I quickly lowered my head, then got into the car and started the engine. Once they were completely gone, I left the store and took Elena home early. She was a little confused, but I told her I had a headache. That wasn't entirely a lie. At home, after Elena had fallen asleep, I sat in the living room with the main light off. Only the corner lamp was on, dim and yellow. I opened my phone gallery and stared at the photo of our family. Reza's smile in that photo wasn't much different from the smile I had seen earlier that afternoon. But for some reason, that smile in the photo now felt fake. I opened the last message Reza sent that night. I'm coming home a bit late. The meeting ran over. I typed a response. I saw you earlier. On Rue St. Clair. Then I deleted it. I stared at the blank screen. I closed my phone. I didn't need to tell him. I wanted to see how far he would continue to pretend. The next day, Reza acted like usual. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, asked about the laundry, and inquired about Elena's favorite food for lunch. I answered briefly. But in my heart, I made one decision. I needed to understand more. I wanted to know what that woman was like, and why Reza had fallen for her. Not to justify, but to understand the wound he had inflicted on me. I opened Ayla's social media account again, which was still locked. But this time, I found one new photo that I could see. A landscape photo of the lake from an apartment balcony. The caption was short. Where is the best place if not near you? The background of that photo was very familiar. The angle, the lighting, the railing on the balcony. It was from the hotel we stayed at during Reza's birthday. That hotel was not far from the city center. That balcony had once witnessed our first kiss after we got married. I didn't know which hurt more. Reza sleeping with another woman, or Reza taking that woman to places that had once meant so much to us. I wanted to know if Ayla knew about me. About Elena. Did she know that the man she loved was someone's husband? Or did she simply not care? I sat back in the living room, lit a small aromatherapy candle, and closed my eyes. And for the first time since I knew everything, I said to myself, I won't stay silent. I will find out everything, and I will decide my own way out. That night, Reza came home later than usual. He entered the house like always, hung his jacket, kissed Elena on the cheek while she was asleep. Then he came to the kitchen, saw me still sitting. You're still awake? He asked. I turned slowly. No. Just thinking. Thinking about what? I smiled. The calmest smile I could muster. Thinking about how someone can look so happy, while hiding a corpse under their clothes. He stared at me for a moment. Then nodded slowly. What do you mean, Dir? I stood up. Took the empty cup and brought it to the sink. My voice was light. Neutral. Without any rising tone. I mean, sometimes, people just need enough time to embarrass themselves. He didn't say anything. I didn't look back. But I knew that night, my words hit harder than any tears or screams. Because I was no longer just silent. I had started to move. That day, the sky over Annecy was cloudy. Dry maple leaves scattered across the backyard. I sat at the dining table, staring at the teacup whose steam had long faded. Across from me, Reza's seat was empty. He had left earlier than usual, claiming a presentation with a client. But I knew, this morning wasn't about architecture projects. This morning, he was beginning the end of everything we had once built together. It had been 2 weeks since Reza's confession. 2 weeks since he admitted to falling in love with another woman. 2 weeks since I had been holding onto the recording of his phone call. 2 weeks of sleepless nights. But that day, I felt the need to know more. I needed to dig deeper. I needed to embrace the pain so I wouldn't be blinded by assumptions. I wanted to understand, even if the end result would shatter me. At 9 in the morning, I dressed neatly and dropped Elena off at school as usual. After that, I walked through the city streets towards a small gallery where my friend Clara worked. Clara was one of the few French people who had truly become close to me since we moved here. She knew a lot about the art world, the gossip of the town, and more importantly, how to read the body language of people. Clara looked at me the moment I walked in. She squinted her eyes and then said softly, "You look broken." I smiled faintly. "And you're still honest." We sat in the back room, surrounded by unfinished paintings and the scent of oil paint. I took a deep breath, then said without any preamble, "Do you know Ayla Moreau?" Clara looked surprised. "Of course. That beautiful poison." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Clara stared at me for a long moment, then leaned back in her chair. "Dira, do you know where she works now?" I shook my head. "At the architecture firm where Reza works. As a design consultant. She started about 5 months ago. And since then, everyone knows there's something between her and Reza." My heart stopped for a fraction of a second. My hand gripped my knee. "Everyone knows?" My voice cracked. Clara looked down. "I'm sorry I'm telling you this now. I thought you already knew. Or, at least Reza was honest with you." I laughed softly. A hollow laugh that made the air around us feel cold. "So, I'm the last wife to know that my husband is in love with his colleague." Clara didn't answer. She just held my hand. "Has he ever brought her to this house?" I whispered. Clara shook her head quickly. "Not as far as I know. But they're often seen having lunch together. Sometimes they go home together. Sometimes." Ayla gets in Reza's car from the back parking lot. My eyes burned. But there were no tears. Only exhaustion slowly seeping from my chest to the rest of my body. Clara looked at me sharply. "Do you want me to confront them?" I shook my head. "I want to know everything. But not to get angry. I just want to know where I stand. And how far they've gone." Clara lowered her head, then reached into her bag. She took out her phone, and showed me a few photos that made my breath catch. Photos of Reza and Ayla at the town festival. together, unaware of the camera. They were standing too close. There was a photo of Reza looking at Ayla the way he used to look at me. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. I took the photo, secretly keeping it. Evidence. Not to attack, but to save myself from blindness. On my way home, I didn't go straight back to the house. I sat at a small cafe, ordered black coffee with no sugar, and opened a small notebook I had kept in my bag for a long time. The notebook contained fragments of sentences I had written since I first started feeling our marriage changing. Page after page, there were unfinished thoughts. But that day, I wrote a full paragraph. "I know now. Everyone knows. Everyone except me. But that's okay. I'm not a victim. I'm just a wife who waited too long to hear the truth that had already been circulating in office corridors and foreign mouths." When I arrived home, Reza was in the living room. He looked surprised to see me back that afternoon. "Where have you been?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I slowly took off my shoes and answered, "Met a friend." He nodded. "Clara." I didn't answer. I just walked toward the kitchen, opened the fridge, took a bottle of water, and drank it all in one go. Reza followed behind. "Dir, I need to talk." I turned to face him. My gaze was calm. "Talk, if you can be honest. If not, it's better to stay silent." He looked down. "I'm still confused." "Confused because of her?" I asked flatly. Reza nodded slowly. "You said you fell in love. But you didn't leave. Why?" He didn't answer. "Is it because of Elena? Or because you weren't brave enough?" "I'm afraid of losing everything," he muttered. I laughed softly. "Sadly, you've already lost me, since you started falling in love with someone else and never said a word." I turned and walked away from him, but my steps stopped at the threshold of the kitchen door. "Oh, one more thing," I said without turning. "Don't bring Ayla to this house. Not because I'm jealous, but because this house was built from promises we made. And I don't want a woman who doesn't understand promises to come here and defile it." Reza fell silent. His body stiffened. His face was hidden from my view. But I knew that night, my words hit like a mirror forced back onto his own face. I went upstairs, took my laptop, and started reopening my old files as an interior designer. I saw messages from old clients, portfolios I had won, projects that had been postponed. And that was when I realized, before being Reza's wife, I was someone. And I could be that again. The past few days, this house has felt like a silent stage. We still live under the same roof, but we're like two actors out of dialogue. Reza and I only speak when necessary, about Elena, about the bills that need to be paid, about who should pick her up from school. There are no arguments, but there is also no life. What remains is emptiness. I started sleeping in Elena's room every night. She never protested. In fact, it seemed like she liked the company. But I knew, even a child so young could feel that something was wrong. She was quieter. Sometimes she would hug me for no reason. Sometimes she would ask, "Why doesn't Papa eat with us anymore?" And I would always answer, "Papa is busy, sweetheart." When the truth was, it was my heart that was busy holding everything in so that I wouldn't collapse in front of our child. One night, I was awakened by a soft sound from the living room. Elena was sleeping beside me, still holding her bunny doll. I slowly got up, opened the bedroom door, and walked down the stairs. Below, the kitchen light was dimly lit. The sound was coming from Reza. He was on the phone, standing on the side balcony with his back to the house. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. But when I heard that voice, not the content of his words, but the way he spoke, I knew. It was the voice of a man who was no longer tied. "I can't keep doing this. She's too calm, that's what scares me." Silence. "Yeah. It's like she knows everything but is just waiting for me to explode." Another pause. "No, I haven't told her about us. She's definitely going to get even angrier." Then the last sentence, softer. "Yeah. I miss you too." I backed away slowly, went upstairs, entered the room, and sat on the floor, leaning against the bed. My breath was heavy. My hand gripped the blanket tightly. I didn't know which hurt more, hearing him continue to lie, or realizing that I was no longer surprised. Just tired. The next morning, Reza asked if I could talk for a moment. I sat in the living room. He stood uneasy, then finally spoke. I want to be honest. I looked at him without expression. I haven't broken up with Ayla yet. I just nodded. I didn't answer. He continued, I don't know what to do, Dir. I know you're hurt. But I'm also confused about where to go. I never expected things to get this complicated. You think this is complicated? I asked quietly. Reza looked down. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I want you to know everything. I'm looking for an apartment. I won't be here much longer. An apartment? I repeated. Yeah. I think, maybe it's time we give each other some space. I laughed softly, bitterly. So after everything that's happened, you're the one who decided to leave this house. Not because you were kicked out, but because you think it's the most polite choice, huh? He stayed silent. I stood up, facing him. Reza, you can leave. But don't ever think your decision is noble. You're leaving because you want a different life, not because you're trying to save us. He stared at me. His eyes started to well up. But I didn't want his tears. I wanted the real confession. And that never came. The days after that confession felt strange. Reza started bringing home fewer things. A few times, I saw his small suitcase in the back of the car. He stayed out 1 or 2 nights. He didn't say where he went. I didn't ask. I didn't text him. But my nights were filled with nightmares. Nightmares of Ayla sitting at our dining table, feeding Elena. Nightmares of Reza laughing on the balcony with another woman, while I watched from a distance like a ghost. Nightmares of this house slowly crumbling, brick by brick, while I stood in the middle of the ruins, constantly saying, I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. One night, I woke up gasping for air. I was shivering, sweating cold. I stared at the ceiling, feeling like my chest was being squeezed. I went down to the kitchen and sat alone in the dark. No sounds. Only the ticking of the clock and the whispers in my head that never stopped. Why didn't he choose me? I knew that was a foolish question. I knew love doesn't always follow a straight line. But still, I wanted to know what was lacking in me. What made Reza leave after everything we had been through together? The next day, I sent Reza a message. If you're really leaving, tell me. I'll talk to Elena. Don't make her confused. Don't keep going back and forth without direction. The message was read. But it wasn't replied to immediately. A few hours later, Reza responded. I'll pick up my things this weekend. After that, I won't come back to the house without your permission. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not because I was angry, but because I wanted to start moving forward without depending on a small screen in my hand. Saturday afternoon, Reza came. He brought 2 large suitcases, filled with clothes, books and work supplies. He didn't say much. Neither did I. Elena was napping. Maybe that was for the best. Before leaving, Reza stood in front of the door, looking at me. I know I'm wrong. But I also know, you're too strong to break because of this. I just nodded. Then said softly, I will be strong. But not because of you. Because I have no other choice. He opened the door, stepped out, then turned once more. I'll still be a good father to Elena. I nodded again. I hope you're right. And the door closed. For the first time since we moved to this city, the house felt truly empty. No Reza's breath. No footsteps in the morning. No sound of his laptop from the work desk. No scent of his cologne in the bathroom. But strangely, that night, I was able to sleep. Not because everything was okay, but because finally, I wasn't living inside a lie I once called home. That morning, Elena woke up earlier than usual. She sat up in bed, rubbed her eyes, then looked around the room with a confused expression. Where's Papa? The question hit me like a hammer to the chest. It had been 3 days since Reza really moved out of the house. He hadn't contacted Elena even once. No video calls. No voice messages. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently stroked my daughter's hair. Papa is working, sweetheart. Ayla nodded slowly. Then asked, Papa's not coming home? I took a deep breath, then gave a small nod. Papa doesn't live here anymore. She stared at me for a long time, her mouth slightly open, as if the words hadn't fully registered. Why? I tried to smile. Because now Papa lives in a new place. But you can still see him. I'll arrange it. Ayla didn't answer. She just lowered her head, then turned over and lay down again. This time, with her back to me. I sat there for a few minutes, staring at her small back. Then slowly walked out of the room, holding back the tears that hadn't had a chance to fall since the night before. That day, I tried to go about everything like usual. I took Ayla to school, shopped for vegetables at the weekly market, greeted a few neighbors who didn't know anything about the slowly crumbling house we were living in. In my mind, everything was noisy. But on the outside, I still looked calm. Even when I returned home and saw the dining table set for only two, I still managed to play soft jazz music, just like I always did. In the afternoon, while I was ironing clothes in the living room, my phone vibrated. A message from Reza. Can I see Ayla on Sunday? I read that sentence over and over again. Then typed my reply. Sure. But only at the house. He replied quickly. Okay. What time? 3 p.m. Sunday came. The sun was dimly shining. The sky was slightly overcast, like something was hanging, waiting to fall. Ayla sat on the sofa in her favorite yellow dress. Her hair was neatly combed. She asked for 2 braids. She didn't ask why Papa was coming, but I knew she was waiting. Waiting for something she couldn't say. Reza arrived right on time. He wore a navy sweater and dark jeans. His face looked thinner, but his smile was still the same. Papa! Ayla exclaimed and immediately ran to hug him. I stood in the kitchen doorway, letting them greet each other. Reza picked Ayla up, hugged her tightly, then kissed her forehead, guilt hidden in his eyes. How's my girl? He whispered. Ayla smiled widely. I miss you. Reza turned to look at me, a bit hesitant. Can I talk to Ayla for a moment? I nodded. I'll be in the kitchen. They sat in the living room. I could hear Ayla's cheerful voice, telling stories about school, about her new friend who had shiny shoes, and about a drawing competition she would join next week. Reza responded with laughter and praise, but in the pauses between his words, I could hear the awkwardness he was trying to hide. About an hour later, Reza came into the kitchen holding an empty cup. Can we talk for a bit? I turned from the sink. About what? He sat in the chair near the door. About Ayla. I immediately stopped washing, but didn't say anything. I know you don't want to hear her name. But I want to be honest. We're still together. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands with a towel. I already know, I replied. He looked at me. I won't bring her to this house. I promise. I nodded slowly. Good. Because if you do, I'll make sure you'll never be able to come back here. Reza was silent. Then he spoke softly. She's not a bad person, Dir. I looked at him sharply. Maybe not. But you're still destroying your own family with her. And that isn't about who's bad. It's about who's betraying. He looked down. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. Then I looked directly into his eyes. Listen, Reza. From now on, you can see Ayla once a week. But here, in this house. Not at your place. Not at the apartment you're sharing with someone who doesn't know our child. He nodded. I understand. We were silent for a moment. Then he stood up and walked toward the door. Thank you, Dir. I didn't respond. He closed the door softly and left. When I turned to the window, I saw Ayla standing there, staring outside. She wasn't crying. But her eyes were empty. I walked over and hugged her from behind. Papa's going to work, right? She asked quietly. I nodded. Yes, sweetheart. But Papa will come back. She hugged my hand. Mama, don't go too. I looked down and kissed her head. Mama's here. Always. That night, I slept in my own room for the first time since Reza left. The room felt too big, too cold. But for the first time, I also felt lighter. Not because the wound had healed, but because I knew I had finally gathered enough courage to begin rebuilding my life, even if alone. And as I closed my eyes, I knew this was just the beginning of everything. Since Reza really left, mornings in this house have become quieter, but no longer suffocating. I used to wake up every day with anxiety about what he would say, or what he wouldn't say. But now, I wake up with an honest loneliness. It's not pleasant, no. But it's real. I started filling my days with little things. I began taking care of the plants on the balcony again. I read old books that used to just gather dust on the shelves. I even started sketching interior designs that I had left behind when Ayla was born. Something inside me slowly started to rise. Like a light that had once gone out, but was now flickering again though faint. One afternoon, Clara invited me to a new gallery in Old Town Annecy. They were looking for a freelance curator to help with a contemporary interior exhibition. I almost declined, but Clara insisted. This isn't for anyone else, Dir. It's for you. You can rise again, she said, squeezing my hand. I went to the gallery with trembling hands. Not because I lacked confidence, but because I was afraid to admit, I missed being myself. The exhibition would take place in 2 months. They liked my visual concept, a blend of tropical aesthetics and European minimalism. Clara smiled widely when I came out of the presentation room. See? You still can, she said. I didn't cry. But there was something warm in my chest. Not great happiness, but like a breath I had been holding in was finally able to escape. A few days later, Reza came again to see Ayla. I opened the door, and as usual, he stood awkwardly with a small bag of toys and storybooks. Ayla immediately ran and hugged him. That afternoon, they played in the backyard. I didn't join them. I sat in the kitchen preparing dinner, trying not to eavesdrop, but secretly listening to the sound of my child's joyful laughter. Occasionally, Reza's laughter could be heard too. But I didn't react. His voice used to be like music to me. Now, it was just the sound of an ordinary person. After Ayla fell asleep, Reza knocked on the kitchen door. He stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of tea. I made one for you too, he said. You still like peppermint, right? I nodded and took the cup. He sat across the table. We were silent for a while before he spoke. You look different. Different how? I asked, looking at him flatly. More alive. Stronger. I didn't answer. I just took a sip of my tea. Are you happy? That question was like the steam of the tea suddenly disappearing. Light, but sharp. Does it matter? I asked in return. Reza looked down. For me, yes. I sighed. I'm trying. And for the first time I feel, maybe I can be happy not because of someone, but because of myself. He stayed silent. Then he said, I'm glad to hear that. I stared at him. For a long time. In that silence, there were so many things I wanted to ask. Does Ayla make you happy? Do you ever regret it? But I knew, the answers wouldn't change anything. Reza, I said, you can come here to see Ayla. But don't come for me. Don't send me signals like you're still sorry. Because you've made your choice, and I'm not waiting for anyone to come back. He nodded. I know. And I don't want to disturb you. I just, sometimes miss the way we used to be. I smiled faintly. I do too. But I miss the old me more. Reza looked at me. There was a shadow of pain in his eyes, but I didn't mirror it. He created that pain, and it was no longer my job to heal it. After he left, I sat alone on the balcony. The night in Annecy was so quiet. The lights from the houses shimmered softly. The neighbors' windows glowed with the warmth of their families. But I wasn't envious. I just watched. I opened my laptop and began redesigning my portfolio. One by one, I rebuilt my identity. Not as someone's wife, but as a woman who had fallen, and chose to stand on her own. The next day, when I was taking Ayla to school, one of the other parents approached me. Madam Dira, I saw on Instagram, Clara, you're joining the gallery exhibition? I smiled. Yes, just starting to help out. She nodded in surprise. I thought you were just a housewife. I wasn't offended. I just answered, I used to be a housewife. But now, I'm learning to be more than that. The days after that became busier. Ayla started getting used to the new routine. Reza saw her once a week. I didn't interfere much. No longer checking if he brought her healthy toys or read the right stories. I learned to let go, little by little. And strangely, life became lighter. One night, as I was tidying up a stack of old design books, Ayla came to me. "Mom," she said, "when I grow up, I can stay with you forever, right?" I looked at her. "Of course. Why do you ask?" She bit her lip. "Papa said one day I can stay at his apartment." I held my breath. Then nodded. "You can go there whenever you want. But this house will always be your home too." She hugged me. Tight. "I don't want this house to disappear." I smiled, holding back the sudden sting. "This house won't disappear, sweetie. Because a home isn't about walls and a roof. It's about who stays." And I stayed. Not for Reza. But for myself. For Ayla. And for the life I had to rebuild from the pieces I had silently swallowed. The beginning of February brought with it colder winds than usual. Thin snow started to fall on the roofs of the old houses in Annecy, and the lake looked pale, nearly frozen. But inside me, the fire that had long gone out began to spark again. I was busy preparing for the gallery exhibition that would open in 2 weeks. The dining table had turned into a workspace. The living room walls were covered with sketches, printed mood boards, and concept notes that I kept refining. In the midst of the exhaustion, I found myself smiling. Not because everything was easy, but because I felt alive again. Ayla also began to adjust to her new routine. She was more cheerful, started drawing again, and occasionally talked about her funny friends. Reza still came once a week, spending 2 or 3 hours playing with Ayla. Our interactions were almost wordless. And that was enough. Until one afternoon, after they finished playing, Reza came to the kitchen with a different expression. There was something in his eyes that I couldn't call calm. He stood awkwardly, like someone about to ask for something inappropriate. "Can I talk?" he asked. I closed Ayla's lunchbox and placed it on the table. "Talk." Reza looked at me deeply. "Ayla and we're done." I didn't react. She's the one who decided. She said she's tired. She said I'm too complicated and not over the past. I remained silent. My eyes looked at him, but my heart didn't move at all. "And I realize I lost you too quickly." I raised my hand, stopping him. "Reza," I said softly. "Stop there." He fell silent. "I don't need to know why you ended things. That's between you two. But don't come here trying to stitch up the wound you yourself opened." He gasped slightly, like someone running out of air. "I still love you, Dir." I smiled faintly. A calm smile, without anger. "You fell in love with another woman while I was still here, Reza. And now you've lost her, and then remembered me. But I'm not a home you can come to when the storm hits. I'm not your backup plan." He sat down in the chair near the sink, holding his head. "I was wrong." I nodded. "Yes. But sometimes, Reza, there are mistakes that cannot be paid for with regret." He looked at me, his eyes starting to redden. But I didn't want his tears. I had dried all those tears myself. In the darkest nights. In the room you left empty. "Dira, give me a chance." I looked down for a moment. Then looked straight at him. "I don't hate you, Reza. I've moved past that. But I don't need you to heal. And I don't want you back just because your life didn't go the way you imagined." He looked down, his hands trembling. "I want to come home. This place is no longer your home." The words came out easily. Firm. Not harsh. But enough for him to understand. He was too late. Reza didn't say anything else. He said goodbye and kissed Ayla gently before leaving. I stood behind the window curtain, watching his back slowly fade away, once again. But this time, I didn't cry. The next day, Clara came to the house, bringing fresh lilies and chocolate cake. We sat on the cold balcony, wrapping ourselves in thick blankets while sipping hot chocolate. I heard from the skies, she said, smiling. Your crazy ex came back? I laughed softly. Yes. And he thinks I'm still at the same place when he left. Clara looked at me in awe. I'm proud of you. I shook my head. I'm just learning to stand. After sitting too long in the dark. And now you're shining, she said softly. The days leading up to the exhibition opening passed quickly. I started meeting many colleagues, local artists, and design journalists. Many were interested in my concept. Some asked if I took on private projects. One night, I stood in front of the large mirror in the bedroom, wearing a simple black dress for the opening night. Ayla came into the room and stared at me from the door. You look so pretty, Mama, she said. I smiled and hugged her. You're beautiful too, sweetheart. She looked at me for a long time. Is Papa coming tonight? I shook my head. No. Tonight is just for Mama. She nodded. Are you happy, Mama? I nodded. Very. And when I answered that, for the first time in a long time, I was truly sure of my answer. The sky over Annecy slowly changed from pale grey to golden orange. In front of the old gallery building, which had just been renovated, people started to gather. Some wore raincoats, as the weather forecast had predicted light rain that evening. But no one seemed worried. They came with smiles, warm greetings, and a genuine curiosity. I stood at the side of the room, holding a glass of white wine in my right hand, wearing a simple black dress and low heels. No excessive decorations. My hair was neatly styled, with just a pair of small earrings hanging from my ears. Clara stood beside me. She squeezed my hand tightly and said, Tonight, you stand as the woman you chose to be. I didn't answer. I just smiled and looked around. The works I had curated were lined up in the quiet white room. Soft instrumental music played from a small speaker. There were no flashy camera flashes. No grand stage. But something flowed quietly from every corner, an acknowledgement of existence. A few people came up to me, introducing themselves. There were artists, local cafe owners, and design magazine journalists. They praised the layout choices, the lighting, and even the live plants in the corner that made the space feel more organic. They didn't know who I was before tonight. They didn't know that the hand that picked the colors had once trembled because of an unsent divorce letter. They didn't know that the steps I took to arrange this space came from legs that had once been weak when I heard the word affair from the mouth of the man I used to call home. But they didn't need to know. Because tonight, I wasn't the woman who was left behind. I wasn't the wife who was cheated on. I was someone. Fully. Whole. An hour later, Ayla came with Clara. She wore a red coat and little boots. As soon as she entered, she ran to hug me. Mama, this is so beautiful, she said, her eyes sparkling. I nodded. Thank you, sweetie. This is all for you too. She pointed to one of the installation pieces on the right, a piece of old rattan chair tied with wire and illuminated with a warm yellow light. That's like our chair on the balcony, she said. I smiled. That's where the inspiration came from. Ayla wandered through the exhibits, holding Clara's hand. They laughed softly, talking about colors and textures. I watched them from afar, then glanced at my watch. Reza didn't come. Not because he wasn't invited, but because I didn't mention the event to him. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for keeping something from him. I didn't hold any grudges. I just wanted one night that was mine, without the shadow of the past intruding. As the gallery started to empty around 10 p.m., Clara suggested we sit on the small bench outside the room. The cold air pierced through my bones, but the evening breeze carried the aroma of toasted bread from a bakery across the street. We sat side by side, in silence. This isn't the end, she said suddenly. But tonight is the night when you take your life back. I looked at the sky. There were no stars. But the moon hung low, almost touching the rooftops of this old city. I don't need an end, I replied. I just need space to breathe. Clara gently patted my shoulder. And you succeeded. When we went back inside, Ayla was already sitting drowsily in the corner of the room. I carried her, whispering, "Let's go home." She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. That night, we walked home. The streets of Annecy were quiet, only the sound of our footsteps and the shadows of streetlights stretching across the wet pavement. In front of the house, I stopped for a moment, staring at the window where I used to stand waiting for Reza to come home late at night. But now there was no waiting. No fear. I slowly opened the door, took Ayla to her room, took off her shoes, tucked her tiny body in, and then sat in the chair near the window. I looked at the room, now calm. There were no debates. No hidden tears. No shadow of anyone behind the bathroom door. Just me. And the silence. But the silence that night didn't hurt anymore. I opened the notebook I used to carry with me, filled with fragments of emotions and unfinished sentences. I took out my pen and wrote a new paragraph. I was once broken in this house. But I also healed here. No one forced me. No one gave me a signal. I just got up. And chose to stay standing. Then I closed the notebook, blew out the lavender-scented candle on the side table, and walked to my own room. For the first time in my life, I slept not because I was tired, but because I was at peace. And that is the end. Not the end of everything, but the end of a story that was never truly asked to begin. A story about broken trust, about wounds that grow in silence, and about someone who chose not to wait anymore for someone who left without saying goodbye. Sometimes, life doesn't give any signs when something changes. Sometimes, the person we love the most teaches us how to let go. And in the deepest silence, we rediscover our own voice. Because in the end, there are days that feel heavy. There are nights that are too long. But there is always a morning waiting. For any woman who dares to say, I can without you.